You came here to end my career. But I think I just began yours. The words echoed in my head like a prophecy. I hadn't heard them yet, at least not in this exact moment, but some part of me knew they were waiting for me, hovering at the edge of the future. Maybe that's why my stomach tightened the second I stepped into the glass-walled office of Riley Hayes, director of HR. Riley's office always felt like a terrarium, bright, spotless, and suffocating. Sunlight blazed through the wide windows, hitting the polished table and bouncing back in sterile reflections. It made me feel like I was under a magnifying glass, the kind that burns ants. Today, I was the ant. Amelia. Riley gestured toward the chair opposite her. Perfectly manicured nails tapped the folder in front of her. Sit. I sat, smoothing my blazer as if armor could be sewn from polyester. We've got a situation, Riley said, her tone brisk and managerial like she was ordering lunch. The board wants Dorian Kane removed from his position. Quietly. No fireworks. The name dropped like a coin in a silent fountain. Dorian Kane. Vice President of Operations. The man whose reputation stretched further than his shadow. The one everyone respected but no one trusted. The one I had only glimpsed in passing, tall, immaculate. The kind of presence that made people straighten their posture without realizing why. You want me to terminate him? My voice cracked only slightly. I covered it with a cough. Riley leaned back in her leather chair, expression calm, almost bored. Not terminate, transition. Think of it as guiding him out of the company. An HR-managed off-ramp, a polite euphemism for destroy his career. I'll need a file, I said. Proof of misconduct, policy violations. Anything that supports the case. You won't find a neat little smoking gun. Riley's eyes flicked down to the folder, then back to me. But the board has spoken. This is bigger than compliance checklists. It's about stability. You understand? I understood perfectly. They wanted me to play executioner, without evidence, without cause, just obedience. My throat felt tight. You're asking me to undermine due process. I'm asking you to do your job. Riley's voice hardened. We need loyalty, Amelia. Not sermons. A heat flared in my chest, anger, indignation, fear, all tangled. I'd built my career on the belief that rules mattered, that fairness could anchor even the messiest office politics. And now my own boss was telling me to shred that belief like a piece of scrap paper. Why me? I asked. Because you're principled, Riley smiled thinly. He won't see it coming from you. And because you'll do it clean. Translation, they needed someone who wouldn't leave bloodstains. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to throw the folder back across the desk and tell her no. But laughter would sound hysterical, and refusal would paint a target on my back. So I picked up the folder. The pages inside were thin, flimsy, and felt heavier than lead. I'll talk to him, I said, keeping my voice level. Good. Riley smoothed her skirt, already moving on to her next task. You'll set up a meeting. Conference room 19A is available this afternoon. Handle it professionally. No drama, no drama. As if drama wasn't guaranteed the moment Dorian Kane was involved. I stood, folder clutched in my hands like a death warrant. My reflection in the glass wall looked pale, eyes wide, jaw set too tight. I didn't look like an HR manager. I looked like someone about to step into a battlefield. Amelia? Riley's voice stopped me at the door. I turned. This is a project for the good of the company, she said smoothly. Don't make it personal. I nodded. Because, what else could I do? But inside, something twisted. If this wasn't personal now, it would be soon. Walking down the corridor toward the elevators, the folder pressed against my chest. I felt like I was marching toward an execution chamber. Only I couldn't tell whether I was meant to be the executioner or the condemned. Either way, I knew one thing. Meeting Dorian Kane wasn't going to be ordinary business. It was going to change everything. And somewhere in the back of my mind, like a voice already waiting in the shadows, the words whispered again. You came here to end my career. but I think I just began yours. Conference room 19A looked more like a gallery than a meeting space. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the wall, letting in a spill of afternoon light that turned every surface to glass and steel. The room was empty but not silent. Every step I took echoed too loudly, as if the walls were rehearsing what I was about to say. And there he was. Dorian Kane stood at the far end of the long table, back to the window, city skyline framing him like it was his throne. He didn't move when I entered. He didn't need to. His presence was enough to make the air feel heavier, as though the atmosphere itself had been briefed to obey him. Tall. Perfect suit, dark as ink, hands clasped loosely in front of him. Eyes that seemed to measure me like a balance sheet, cold and precise. "Ms. Hart," he said. My name on his tongue sounded like a verdict. "Mr. Kane," I managed, keeping my grip on the folder so tight the edges cut into my palm. The door swung shut behind me with a soft click. I hadn't touched it. I swallowed. "Thank you for meeting on such short notice." His gaze swept over me, sharp and unblinking. "You didn't ask me. You were sent." Heat crept up my neck. "I schedule meetings for a living. You'll have to trust me when I say this one is real." A flicker of something crossed his face. Amusement, maybe, though it barely curved his mouth. He extended a hand slightly, palm upward. The lights above dimmed, softened, as though responding to him. He lowered the hand, the lights steadied. My pulse jumped. I told myself it was coincidence. Faulty wiring. Nothing more. "You're here to remove me," he said plainly, as though commenting on the weather. "I'm here to discuss." I opened the folder, voice stiff. Allegations regarding performance and conduct. Allegations without signatures, complaints without sources, proof without evidence. He tilted his head. "Tell me, Miss Hart, does your handbook sanction witch hunts?" I bristled. "Our handbook," I flipped a page, using procedure like armor, "clearly states that executive review is warranted when trust in leadership has been compromised. And trust is compromised because..." He leaned slightly forward, voice smooth, velvet over steel. "Because I don't bend to their whims? Because I run this place with rules they find inconvenient? Because people feel intimidated." My voice sharpened before I could stop it. "Because when you walk into a room, no one breathes until you leave." Silence stretched. He let it sit there, heavy, deliberate. Then his lips curved, just slightly. "That sounds efficient." My jaw clenched. Intimidation isn't efficiency. It's fear. And fear doesn't build companies. People do. His eyes gleamed, a shade darker than shadow. Fear builds obedience, and obedience builds order. "Tell me, Amelia." He dropped my last name like it was unnecessary, intimate. In the worst way. When rules collapse, what keeps the building from burning? I opened my mouth to argue, but something shifted in the corner of my vision. The blinds lowered halfway, a mechanical whir filling the silence. Dorian hadn't moved. Coincidence. I told myself again, coincidence, though my skin prickled. "You're deflecting," I said. "This isn't about burning buildings, it's about accountability. And you're here to hold me accountable." He stepped closer, slow, deliberate, every stride calculated. He stopped just opposite me, the length of the table still between us. The principled HR crusader sent to deliver judgment. My hands itched to slam the folder shut. Instead, I held his gaze. "If you know why I'm here, then you know how this ends." He studied me. Too long, too deep. The way you study a locked door you already have the key for. Finally, he leaned one hand on the table, lowering his voice so it wrapped around the air between us. "You came here to end my career," he said. And this time the words weren't a premonition. They were real, present, final. His eyes burned like the city lights behind him. "But I think I just began yours." The air tightened. The folder felt useless in my hands, a paper shield against something far greater. And for the first time, I wasn't sure who was evaluating whom. The office looked different after that meeting, or maybe I did. Rows of cubicles stretched endlessly, gray dividers and muted chatter filling the air like background noise on repeat. Everything looked ordinary, but the echo of Dorian's words still pulsed in the back of my mind. If I was going to do this by the book, I needed evidence. Allegations, records, inconsistencies, something solid enough to justify why I was here. Without it, I was nothing more than a pawn with a clipboard. I started in the archives. Dusty filing cabinets hummed under fluorescent lights, papers stacked like bricks of an invisible fortress. My fingers flipped through reports, financial audits, employee complaints, disciplinary forms. The deeper I went, the stranger it got. Anonymous grievances filed with no dates. Complaints written in nearly identical handwriting, though supposedly from different employees. Performance reviews with entire sections blacked out, like classified documents. It felt less like evidence and more like theater. Props arranged for an audience too impatient to question the script. By the time I reached the bottom of the stack, my head throbbed. This wasn't an investigation. It was a setup. Out in the main office, employees scurried between desks with robotic efficiency. Not one raised their voice. Not one leaned back in their chair. Their eyes flickered nervously whenever Dorian's name appeared on an email. Notification, as though 2 lines of text could snap their spines straight. It unsettled me. Yes, I'd worked under intimidating leaders before. But this wasn't the usual mix of respect and survival instinct. This was different. Like invisible wires pulled their shoulders upright and sealed their lips shut. I jotted down notes, careful not to let my expression betray me. HR managers live and die by the art of poker face. I needed caffeine, desperately. The break room was mercifully empty, save for the faint hum of the vending machine. I poured myself a mug of coffee, dark and too bitter, and leaned against the counter, trying to breathe through the knots in my chest. Violation, the single word nearly made me drop the cup. I turned. Dorian stood in the doorway, arms folded neatly across his chest, gaze pinned directly on the offending mug in my hand. "What?" My voice came out higher than intended. "No lid," he said flatly, as though reciting a law carved in stone. "Open containers at workstations are prohibited, spillage risk, policy infraction." My mouth opened, then closed. "Are you seriously giving me a verbal warning for drinking coffee?" "Not coffee," he corrected. "Carelessness." Something between irritation and laughter bubbled in my throat. "You don't outrank me in HR procedure." His lips twitched, just slightly. "Don't I?" The lights above flickered once, faint but noticeable. His eyes didn't leave mine. I clutched the mug tighter, suddenly aware that he hadn't raised his voice. Hadn't. Tea moved more than an inch, and yet I felt like I'd been written up in triplicate. "You're ridiculous," I muttered, brushing past him with my coffee anyway. Behind me, I swore I heard the faintest chuckle. Back at my desk, the folder Riley had given me sat untouched. Pages of questionable complaints stared back, flimsy as tissue. My pen hovered over them, but my hand refused to move. What was I supposed to do? Pretend any of this was credible? Pretend the board wasn't orchestrating a farce? My eyes drifted to the cubicles again. Everyone so rigid, so silent, acting like the rules of this office weren't written in ink or typed into handbooks but spoken by a single man. Dorian Kane. I exhaled, long and shaky, and leaned back in my chair. Maybe, just maybe, the board wasn't the side of truth after all. The office at night felt like an entirely different building. Cubicles stood hollow, chairs abandoned, the hum of fluorescent lights softer now, like a lullaby for empty desks. Most people had gone home hours ago. I should have too. Instead, I was trailing Dorian Kane down the quiet corridor, folder in hand, pulse drumming faster than my heels against the polished floor. A complaint had surfaced late in the day, some employee citing hostile tone during a department briefing. Normally, this would land neatly in my lap. But when the alleged hostile tone belonged to Dorian, Riley had insisted I get his statement directly, which is how I found myself walking side by side with him at 9 o'clock at night. He stopped at a copy room door, motioned me inside, and leaned casually against the counter while I spread the file across it. His jacket was still buttoned, his tie immaculate, as if exhaustion wasn't coded into his DNA. Meanwhile, I'd shed my blazer hours ago and felt more human, and therefore more vulnerable by comparison. "The complaint says you raised your voice," I began, pen poised. "I didn't. That's what they allege. I don't raise my voice." He met my eyes, steady, unwavering. "I don't need to." Something in his tone made me believe him instantly. It wasn't defensiveness. It was fact, simple and immovable. "Then how do you explain it?" I pressed. "I told an underperforming manager to meet their deadlines. They didn't like hearing it, so they cried foul." He shrugged faintly. "Truth sounds hostile to people who prefer lies." I bit my lip, half to stop a retort, half to hide the twitch of agreement tugging at my mouth. He hadn't lied once since I met him. He'd irritated me, unnerved me, even mocked me, but never lied. "Still," I said, scratching notes I didn't need, "perception matters. If someone feels threatened, then feelings outweigh facts." His gaze sharpened, a blade disguised as a stare. "Is that your policy?" I exhaled, fighting the urge to match his sharpness. "My policy is that people deserve to feel safe at work, even if that means tempering the truth." He tilted his head. "And yours? Do you temper it?" The question landed deeper than it should have. I looked down at the form, at the words, "hostile environment," and for once, I didn't have a neat HR answer. My ID badge slipped from my blouse pocket as I moved. It dangled awkwardly on its lanyard, caught against my hair. Before I could fix it, he reached forward. 2 fingers brushed the plastic, lifting it gently, straightening it against my chest. The contact was fleeting. Barely there, but my breath caught like he'd touched fire to my skin. "There," he said quietly, almost amused. "Aligned?" For a moment, the silence between us felt charged, heavier than the whole building. My heartbeat was embarrassingly loud in my own ears. I snapped the file shut, needing space, needing air. "That's all I need for now." "Of course." He stepped back, giving me room, but his eyes stayed on mine. And for the first time, they didn't feel cold. They felt steady, like recognition. Walking out into the darkened corridor, I pressed the file against my chest. "Monster," I told myself. "He's a monster." But the words didn't land with conviction, because somewhere under the echo of my heartbeat, another thought whispered back. A monster, maybe, but more honest than anyone else around me. The boardroom had never been my favorite place. Too much glass, too many reflective surfaces, and the long table stretched out like a dissecting slab. Tonight, under the sterile overhead lights, it felt more like a courtroom. I'd been summoned for clarification. That word alone had chilled me. HR clarifications usually meant someone was about to get buried under their own paperwork. Riley sat near the head of the table, posture pristine, smile sharp as a scalpel. Beside her were 3 board members, their faces unreadable. And across from them, silent as a statue, was Dorian Kane. He didn't look at me when I entered. He didn't need to. His presence filled the room anyway, making the other executives fidget with their pens like nervous schoolchildren. "Amelia," Riley said, her voice smooth, rehearsed. "Thank you for coming." I forced a professional smile. "Of course." She slid a folder forward, perfectly aligned with the edge of the table. "We've received concerns regarding your assignment." I froze. "My assignment?" Riley folded her hands. "It appears you've become compromised, emotionally invested. This compromises your ability to remain objective." The words hit like ice water. My throat tightened. "Excuse me?" "You've been spending unusual hours with Mr. Kane," she continued calmly, "reviewing complaints after hours, meeting privately. It gives the impression that your loyalties are conflicted." I blinked at her. My mentor, the woman who taught me every protocol, every careful step of HR procedure. Now her voice was slicing me open in front of the board, polite and merciless. That isn't true, I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. I've been investigating the complaints thoroughly. Nothing more. One of the board members raised a brow. Uninterested. Riley kept her gaze locked on me. Perception matters, Amelia. If you cannot keep appropriate distance, perhaps you aren't the right person to oversee this case. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Betrayal doesn't always come like a dagger. Sometimes it's a single sentence, dressed in professionalism, designed to make you bleed quietly. I glanced across the table. Dorian leaned back in his chair, calm, unreadable. He didn't defend me. He didn't protest. He just watched. The silence pressed on me until my chest burned. "Is that all?" I asked finally. My tone clipped. Riley smiled faintly. "That will be all. We'll review your future role once this situation is resolved." Dismissed, like a child sent out of class. The hallway outside felt colder than the boardroom. My heels echoed sharply, each step faster than the last, until I almost collided with the tall figure waiting near the elevators. Dorian. He studied me for a long moment, his eyes not sharp this time but heavy, as if weighing something invisible. "You knew," I said before I could stop myself. "You knew they'd turn it on me." He tilted his head slightly, voice even. "Of course." Anger surged, hot and ugly. "And you just sat there? What did you expect me to do?" His tone was maddeningly calm. "Fight for you?" They'd call it proof. The elevator dinged. He didn't move. Neither did I. Finally, he leaned closer, just enough that his words brushed against the air between us. "Rules don't save you from a knife in the back," he murmured. "You should know that by now." My breath caught, fury tangled with shame. Because he was right. The handbook I clung to like scripture hadn't shielded me from Riley's betrayal. The doors opened. He stepped inside, gaze steady on me until the doors slid shut. I stood alone in the corridor, my pulse hammering, betrayal cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. Riley, of all people. My hands clenched into fists around the useless folder. If the board wanted me out, they'd have to fight harder. I wasn't giving up. Not on the truth, and not on myself. And I swore, right there in the empty hallway, that I would find out exactly what game was being played, no matter who I had to take down to do it. The building at night was a hollow shell, stripped of the bustle that made it feel alive by day. The cubicles were dark, monitors asleep, the only light coming from the emergency strips along the walls. The hum of electricity seemed louder without voices to mask it. I should have gone home after the board meeting. Instead, I found myself wandering back upstairs, folder clutched tight, heart pounding with questions that refused to die. That's when I saw him. Dorian stood at the far end of the corridor, one hand braced against the glass wall, the other loose at his side. His posture was relaxed, but the air around him wasn't. The overhead lights flickered once, twice, and then steadied as he straightened. The doors at the end of the hall slid open without anyone touching them. Closed, opened again, as if breathing to his rhythm. I froze. He glanced over his shoulder, catching me mid-step. There was no surprise in his expression, only inevitability, like he'd been waiting for me. "Couldn't sleep?" His voice carried easily, smooth in the cavernous silence. I swallowed hard, forcing my legs to move closer. "I came back for more records." "Of course you did." He lifted his hand slightly. The elevators at the end of the corridor dinged to life, their doors opening in unison. He lowered his hand. They shut again with a metallic sigh. My breath stalled. How do I do it?" His lips curved faintly, not quite a smile. "The same way you breathe. Effortless. Natural." I clutched the folder like it could anchor me. "That's not natural." "Not to you." His gaze cut through me, steady and sharp. "But to me, it is. I am discipline. Order. The structure that keeps this building upright when everyone else is too busy chasing ambition to notice it collapsing." The words shouldn't have made sense, and yet, they did. I thought of the employees sitting stiffly in their cubicles, of the silence that stretched whenever he entered a room, of the strange, identical complaints in the files, of the way lights and doors seemed to respond to him like loyal pets. "You're saying you're, what?" My laugh came out brittle, sharp. "A magician? An architect with remote controls?" His expression didn't waver. "A demon." The word sliced the air clean in two. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for the smirk that would let me dismiss it as another one of his cruel jokes. But there was no smirk. Only truth, bare and unapologetic. "A demon of discipline," he said simply. "Without me, this place is chaos. They don't see it, but I hold the strings." 1,000 instincts screamed at me to run, to get as far from him as the city would allow. But my legs refused. Instead, I stepped closer, my heartbeat rattling like a broken metronome. "You expect me to believe that?" I whispered. He tilted his head. The lights above us dimmed, then flared brighter, as if to punctuate the question. "Do you need belief? Or proof?" I tightened my grip on the folder until my knuckles ached. "If you're a demon, then why am I still standing here?" That faint curve touched his lips again. "Because you don't trust them either. And because you've started to wonder if rules are really what keep this place standing." He wasn't wrong. That terrified me more than the word demon. I drew in a shaky breath. "So what now? You kill me? Possess me? Write me up for another coffee violation?" He stepped closer, closing the distance between us, until I had to tilt my chin up to hold his gaze. "No. I just ask you one question." His voice dropped, lower, quieter, brushing the edges of my skin. "Are you afraid?" The truth was yes. My pulse was frantic, my palms damp, my breath uneven. I was afraid in a way I hadn't been since childhood. Raw, unfiltered, primal, but fear wasn't all I felt. Alongside it was something far more dangerous: awe. Fascination. The pull of a current I had no business stepping into, so I did what I always did when backed into a corner. I deflected. I let out a shaky laugh. "Depends. Are you planning to mark it down on my performance review?" For the first time, his smile was real. Small, fleeting, but real. "No," he said. "This one you keep for yourself." The silence stretched between us, heavy and electric. The building seemed to breathe with him. Every flicker of light and groan of metal attuned to his presence. And in that moment, one truth settled in my chest like a stone sinking in water. I couldn't fire him. Not because I didn't want to. Not because I was too weak. Because it was impossible. He wasn't just in this building. He was the building. Conference room 19A again. But this time, it wasn't just a sterile meeting space. It was an execution chamber. The table gleamed under the harsh lights, papers laid neatly in the center like a prepared altar. My name was printed on the top sheet. Line for witness, line for signature. Riley's impeccable handwriting danced in the margins with her notes. "Proceed cleanly." No drama. Dorian stood at the far end, jacket buttoned, posture relaxed in a way that made the entire room feel staged. The board members weren't here tonight. This wasn't a public trial. It was supposed to be private, quiet, efficient, but it felt anything but quiet. "You've reviewed the documents," he said smoothly, as though asking if I'd checked the weather. I nodded, throat dry. "Yes. And..." I should have answered professionally, with the scripted words Riley wanted to hear. "It's time to transition you out." Instead, all I managed was silence. He moved closer, steps unhurried, deliberate. When he reached the table, he glanced down at the papers, then back at me. His mouth curved faintly, like he was watching a play he'd already seen the ending of. "They expect you to sign." I know. My fingers hovered over the pen beside the folder. It might as well have been a dagger. "You don't want to..." The lights above flickered once, and my pulse jumped. "Want has nothing to do with it," I snapped, grasping for the last thread of authority I had. "This is procedure." "Procedure," he echoed, savoring the word like it was a joke. "Rules on paper that say when to breathe, when to smile, when to die. Tell me, Amelia." His eyes pinned mine, sharp and unrelenting. If you sign, is it because you believe in their justice, or because you fear their power? The air felt heavy, thick. I gripped the edge of the table, nails digging into the wood. It's my job. No, he said softly. It's your cage. The pen rolled slightly across the table, stopping near my hand. I stared at it, heartbeat thrumming so loudly I was sure he could hear it. If I signed, it would be over. Dorian Kane would be removed, scapegoated, silenced, and I'd keep my job, my reputation, my fragile sense of principle. But something in me refused. The same something that had made me see the falsified complaints, the cracks in the reports, the lies disguised as policy. I realized too late that he was moving. Slowly, deliberately, Dorian leaned forward, bracing one hand on the table. His face came closer, eyes dark and steady. The distance between us shrank until I could feel his breath, warm and measured, brushing against my skin. My chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something more dangerous. "Make your choice," he murmured. "Paper. Or me." I should have stepped back. I should have picked up the pen, scribbled my name, and walked out before my knees gave way. Instead, I looked up, and saw not the monster the board painted, but the man, who had never lied to me, who had exposed truths no one else dared to name. The folder slid slightly beneath my fingers as I let go of the pen. My hand rose, trembling, not to sign, but to press against the table between us, closing the space even more. And then it happened. His mouth touched mine, deliberate, certain, as if he'd been waiting since the moment I walked into his office. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't cruel. It was something else entirely, inevitable. Heat surged through me, fierce and consuming. My heart raced. My body leaned into his despite every rule screaming in protest. The kiss deepened, and for a moment, the world fell away. No board, no complaints, no policies. Just him and me, and the undeniable truth pulling us together. When he finally pulled back, the silence was deafening. My lips tingled, my chest rose and fell too fast. His gaze held mine, steady, unreadable. "You came here to end my career," he whispered, the words I'd been carrying like a ghost since the first day. "But I think I just began yours." The room spun. My hand trembled as it fell on the stack of documents. And instead of signing, I tore. The paper ripped in jagged lines, the sound sharp and final, echoing in the sterile chamber. Page after page split beneath my hands until nothing remained but fragments scattered across the polished table. I stood there, chest heaving, staring at the wreckage I'd made. No going back. Not now. Not ever. The office kitchen smelled faintly of burnt coffee and disinfectant wipes. The kind of late-night cocktail only corporate buildings could brew. I stood there, phone in hand, staring at the screen as if it might rewrite itself. It didn't. The messages were still there. My messages. Screenshotted, dissected, and now plastered across an anonymous forum that employees whispered about, but no one admitted reading. My private conversations with Mina, my best friend, the one person I thought I could trust, were out in the open. He scares me, but he doesn't lie. Sometimes I feel like the handbook is just paper shields. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this job. Every word was mine. Every word was being picked apart by strangers who had no right to them. My throat burned. Shame pressed down harder than any reprimand Riley could have handed me. Mina had been the only person I confided in. And she'd sold me out. For what? A promotion? A seat at a table she'd never even wanted before? I dropped into one of the stiff kitchen chairs, phone face down on the table. My hands shook as I pressed them against my eyes, willing the tears back. HR managers don't cry in break rooms. We patch things up, smooth things over, keep control. But control had just been ripped away from me. A soft sound of footsteps pulled me back to the present. I looked up, and of course, it was him. Dorian Kane leaned against the doorframe, hands in his pockets, as if he'd been there all along. The dim kitchen light caught the sharp line of his jaw, but his expression wasn't mocking this time. It wasn't cold either. He crossed the room without a word and sat in the chair beside mine. Not opposite, beside. The silence stretched, but it wasn't suffocating. It was steady. "They'll eat it up," I muttered finally, my voice ragged. Every word. "They'll say I've been compromised, that I'm weak, that I'm unprofessional. They'll say what they always say," Dorian replied evenly. "Noise. Nothing more." I laughed bitterly, wiping at my eyes. "Noise? It's my career, my credibility, everything I've worked for." He tilted his head slightly, studying me. "And yet, you're still here. Sitting upright. Breathing. That doesn't look like collapse to me." The tears slipped free before I could stop them. I hated it. The vulnerability, the proof that Riley and the board were right. But Dorian didn't flinch. He didn't tell me to compose myself. Didn't lecture me about appearances. He just sat there. "You're not going to say it?" I asked, choking back a sob. That I was naive. That I should have known better than to trust her. His gaze held mine, dark and unreadable. "You already know that." My words would only bruise the wound. Something in my chest cracked at that. Not from his sharpness, but from the lack of it. For the first time, he wasn't using my weakness against me. He was simply acknowledging it. I leaned back, pressing a hand over my face, tears hot against my palm. He didn't touch me, didn't offer a handkerchief or some absurd gesture of comfort. He just stayed beside me, silent, immovable, a presence I hadn't realized I needed. And somehow, that was enough. When I finally lowered my hand, my vision blurred with tears. I found myself whispering words I never thought I'd say to him. "It hurts." His eyes softened, barely, but enough. "Good. Pain means you still care." I wanted to argue. I wanted to spit back something sharp, anything to shield myself. Instead, I let the tears fall freely. For once, I didn't hide behind policy or posture. And in that fragile silence, with the demon sitting beside me like the only solid thing left in my collapsing world, I realized something dangerous. For the first time, I trusted him with the part of me I never let anyone see. The hum of the server room was constant, low and restless, like 100 bees trapped inside metal boxes. The blue glow from the racks bathed everything in sterile light, turning my skin pale and my nerves sharper than ever. On my desk earlier that day, a fresh report had appeared, left by Theo, Dorian's ever-smiling assistant. At first glance, it looked perfect, a compilation of performance data, compliance checks, metrics lined up like soldiers. Too perfect. By page 3, I could see the cracks. Numbers didn't match older files. Dates overlapped with meetings that never happened. And tucked neatly at the end was a fabricated section that practically screamed grounds for dismissal. It was clever, subtle enough for the board to swallow, damning enough to bury Dorian. I pressed the file against my chest, stomach twisting, and marched down to the one place Theo hadn't thought I'd go. IT. June's office was a chaos of screens and half-finished energy drinks. Wires looping across the floor like vines. He looked up as I entered, dark circles under his eyes, a half-chewed pen hanging from his mouth. "HR?" he said around the pen. "That's new. Did I accidentally break the dress code again?" I dropped the report on his desk. "I need you to check this." He arched a brow, pulling the file closer. "You know this isn't usually how people ask for IT support." "Please," I said, sharper than intended. "It's urgent." Something in my tone made him put the pen down. He scanned the pages, eyes darting quickly, then typed into one of his monitors. Code spilled across the screen, endless strings of data that meant nothing to me. To him, it was scripture. After a long silence, he leaned back, whistling low. "Wow. Someone really wanted your boss gone." "He's not my boss," I corrected automatically. Jun smirked. "Right. He's your demon." I froze. "What did you just—" "Relax." He waved a hand. Figure of speech. "Man walks around here like gravity bends for him." And apparently, it does. But even demons leave digital footprints. "This report?" Amateur hour. He pulled up 2 files side by side. One genuine, one fake. The differences jumped out immediately now. Timestamps altered, signatures forged, metadata screaming Theo's login credentials. June tapped the screen. See? Sloppy cut and paste job. Whoever did this didn't think anyone would bother looking past the surface. Probably assumed no one cared enough to defend him. A strange heat rose in my chest. But The words slipped out before I could stop them. June tilted his head, grin widening. Well then. Guess that makes 2 of us who aren't buying the theater. For the record, your demon runs this place cleaner than half the board combined. If they fired him, the whole building would collapse within a week. Maybe 2, if we stock up on coffee. Despite everything, a laugh escaped me. Short, surprised, almost painful. But the truth behind it was sharper than humor. June was right. Whatever else Dorian was, the company needed him. And, if I was honest with myself, so did I. I looked at the fake report again, anger flaring. Theo had planted it carefully, but he hadn't counted on me dragging it into the light. Can you prove this? I asked. Can you tie it back to him? June cracked his knuckles, turning back to the keyboard. Watch me. Minutes later, lines of code crystallized into one undeniable fact: Theo's digital fingerprint all over the forgery. Timestamps, IP addresses, even the careless habit of saving files twice under different names. June leaned back, satisfied. There. Open and shut case. Your smoking gun. I exhaled slowly. A weight lifting off my shoulders and settling into something new. Resolve. This wasn't just about doing my job anymore. It wasn't about the board or Riley or even my career. It was about choosing to fight for the one man they all wanted me to destroy. I gathered the evidence, folder now heavier but cleaner than it had ever been. Thank you, I said, voice steady for the first time in days. June shrugged, reaching for his pen again. Don't thank me yet. Taking down Theo won't stop the board. But it'll make a hell of a dent. As I walked out of the server room, the hum of the machines followed me, steady and relentless. And for the first time, so was I. I had the proof. I had the fire. And I knew exactly whose side I was on. The boardroom felt less like a meeting space and more like a courtroom. The long polished table gleamed under 2 bright lights, and the 12 leather. Chairs around it were filled with faces that looked carved from stone. The air was tight with anticipation, the kind that makes even silence feel loud. Riley sat near the head of the table, perfectly composed, her folder stacked neatly before her like evidence prepared for trial. Theo lingered 2 seats down, his suit crisp, his smirk rehearsed. He looked like a man who thought he'd already won. And at the opposite end sat Dorian Kane, arms folded, expression calm, as if the entire proceeding bored him. He didn't glance at me when I entered, didn't signal or acknowledge me in any way. But I felt the tether anyway, invisible and unbreakable. Let's begin, Chairwoman Park said, her voice clipped. Concerns have been raised regarding Mr. Kane's conduct, and regarding Ms. Hart's capacity to remain impartial in her review. Riley's cue. She rose gracefully, unfolding a speech polished to perfection. It has come to our attention that Mr. Kane has created an environment of intimidation and fear. Employees have expressed discomfort, citing hostile behavior and misuse of authority. Further, the HR manager assigned to oversee these complaints has, regrettably, displayed signs of bias. She glanced at me, her eyes cool, surgical. Miss Hart's professionalism has been compromised. Theo leaned forward, sliding a folder across the table. And here you'll find the latest performance report, data irregularities, missed deadlines, falsified compliance checks, all under Mr. Kane's watch. Murmurs stirred among the board. Pages were flipped, brows furrowed. Riley folded her hands as if to say, "Case closed." My pulse hammered. I could almost feel June's evidence burning in my bag, the truth demanding release. I stood before I knew I was going to. That report is a forgery. The room went still. Riley's head turned sharply, surprise flashing before her mask of composure returned. Chairwoman Park arched a brow. "Explain, Miss Hart." My hands trembled, but my voice did not. The document Theo presented was fabricated. Metadata, timestamps, and login credentials prove it originated from his workstation. June from IT verified it. "I have the files here." I placed the folder on the table, sliding it forward. "And as for the complaints, they're anonymous, written in identical handwriting, and lack any substantiating evidence. They were designed to appear damning but collapse under scrutiny." Theo's face flushed red, a crack in his perfect mask. "This is outrageous. She's covering for him. Am I?" I met his eyes, letting steel edge my words. "Or are you trying to erase the one man who holds this place together because you thought no one would bother checking your work?" Riley stood, voice cutting in. "Enough. This is deflection. The fact remains, Amelia Hart has clearly become emotionally entangled. Her testimony cannot be trusted." I turned to her, heart aching from betrayal but fueled by fury. "You taught me that HR was about fairness, about protecting people, not politics. And now you're the one breaking those rules. So tell me, Riley, who's compromised?" Gasps stirred around the table. For once, her composure wavered. Chairwoman Park leaned back, tapping her pen thoughtfully. "This is a serious accusation. Mr. Kane, do you wish to respond?" All eyes turned to him. Dorian rose slowly, unhurried, as though he had all the time in the world. He didn't look at Theo, or Riley, or even the board. He looked directly at me, and then past me, as if his words were meant for something larger. "One truth," he said simply, voice low but resonant enough to cut through the room. "You know which side upholds it. Choose accordingly." That was all. No defense, no argument, no theatrics, just one sentence, weightier than all their speeches combined. The silence that followed was electric. Board members exchanged glances, whispers rising like wind through dry leaves. Some frowned at Riley's folder. Others studied Theo with newfound suspicion. Finally, Chairwoman Park spoke. "This council requires further review, but based on the evidence presented, Mr. Kane remains in his position until such review is complete." Theo's jaw clenched. Riley's lips thinned, but across the table, I saw it. The shift. Doubt creeping into the board. The clean fracture in their united front. My chest rose and fell, adrenaline roaring in my veins. I'd spoken out, risked everything, and somehow, impossibly, it had worked. Dorian sat again, composed as ever, but I caught the faintest flicker in his eyes as they met mine. Not approval. Not victory. Something steadier. Recognition. For the first time, the boardroom didn't feel like a courtroom anymore. It felt like the beginning of a war, and I'd just chosen my side. Dorian's office was quieter than I'd ever heard it. No footsteps in the hall, no humming lights misbehaving overhead. Just the soft tick of a clock on the wall, and the steady rhythm of my own pulse in my ears. He stood by the window, city lights spilling around him like a crown of fire. His jacket was off, sleeves rolled to his elbows, posture deceptively relaxed. I knew better now. Nothing about Dorian Kane was ever uncalculated. "You spoke well today," he said without turning. I crossed the room, folding my arms. "I didn't speak for you. I spoke for the truth." At that, he looked over his shoulder, and the faintest smile tugged at his mouth. "And yet, the truth and I often find ourselves on the same side." I let out a sharp breath. "Don't push your luck." He moved closer, deliberate, until only the desk separated us. "Then let me push something else. A proposal." My brows lifted. "You mean another contract? Not paper? Not policy?" His voice dropped, smoother, more intimate. "A contract of the heart." The words should have made me laugh. Instead, they landed with a weight that rooted me in place. I shook my head, grasping for air. "If you think I'm going to sign my life over, not sign." He leaned forward, palms braced on the desk, eyes holding mine. Choose. Stay with me. Not because the board commands it, not because the rules demand it, but because you want to. The sincerity in his tone startled me more than the word demon ever had. I pressed my hands flat on the desk, steadying myself. If we're talking about contracts, then I have conditions. His brows arched, amused. Of course you do. First, I said firmly, equality. No chains, no cages. I walk beside you, not behind you. Done, he said without hesitation. Second, choice. My decisions are mine. You don't get to dictate everything, not even for my safety. Agreed. I hesitated, then let the smallest smirk curl my lips. And third, coffee. With lids, without lids, however I want. No more lectures. For the first time, his laugh was genuine, low and warm. That one will be the hardest, but very well. The air between us shifted then. Less battle, more truce. My chest loosened, my guard slipped. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't negotiating anymore. I was agreeing. He came around the desk slowly, giving me space to step back. I didn't. When his hand brushed mine, I didn't flinch. When he cupped my face, I leaned into it. And when his lips touched mine, it wasn't inevitable like the first time in the conference room. It was deliberate. A choice. The kiss was softer now, anchored not in defiance but in recognition. Acceptance. I felt the weight of it, the promise in it, more binding than any signature I'd ever inked. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested lightly against mine. So it's settled, he murmured. I smiled, breathless but steady. Our terms. Not theirs. The clock ticked on, the city glowed outside, and for the first time in weeks, I felt balance. Fragile, maybe. But ours. The office didn't feel like the same place anymore. Months had passed, but sometimes I caught myself pausing in the hallway, half expecting to see the old stiffness, the fear, the silence that used to smother these walls. It was gone. Now the air buzzed with quiet energy, not tension. People talked freely in the break rooms. Meetings ended with genuine laughter, not forced smiles. And the system, our system, was finally in place. No anonymous complaints shoved under doors. No fabricated numbers. Instead, every manager and employee signed voluntary pledges, simple statements of accountability written in plain language. Not contracts of fear, but commitments of choice. Transparent, open, fair. Even the board had yielded. Reluctantly at first, but they'd seen the results. Productivity up, turnover down, morale rising like sunlight after too many cloudy days. I sipped from my mug as I watched the new HR portal load on my laptop. The dashboard gleamed with clean metrics, and every chart told the same story: order without intimidation. Your KPIs look almost smug, a familiar voice said. I looked up to see Dorian leaning in the doorway, holding his own mug of coffee, no lid, just to spite his own rules. He wore his usual dark suit, but there was something different in his stance. A looseness. A man who didn't need to command obedience because trust followed him naturally. They're not smug, I replied, grinning. They're satisfied. He stepped inside, setting his mug on my desk. You've built a system where even demons feel safe. I arched a brow. That's because demons are bound by the same rules as everyone else now. His lips curved faintly. With one notable exception. What's that? He reached over, straightening my badge the same way he had that night, months ago. My chest warmed at the familiar gesture, only this time, it wasn't a power move. It was affection. That you, he said softly, seemed to be exempt from every law of gravity I know. I rolled my eyes, but the heat in my cheeks betrayed me. Careful, Mr. Kane. Sentiment looks suspicious on you. We both laughed, the sound light in a way I never thought possible inside these walls. For a long moment we simply stood together, sipping coffee, letting the quiet speak for us. The city pulsed outside the windows, alive and relentless, but in here there was balance. Choice. Us. I leaned back in my chair, meeting his gaze. You know, I said, almost to myself, I came here to fire you. He tilted his head, waiting. But you, I continued, smiling despite the lump in my throat, you became the reason I never quit. Not the job. Not this place. Not myself. My voice dropped to a whisper. The words a truth I no longer feared. I came to end your career. But you're the reason I don't walk out on my own life anymore. His hand found mine across the desk, firm and steady. No contract, no signatures, just choice. And for once, choice was enough.